Welcome to Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation possible. You will get to hear from CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve process challenges and how they've earned success in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, you will enjoy the insights these industry professionals bring to this podcast. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Lisa Richter, the host of Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation and processing possible. In today's episode, we're talking industrial automation with Josh Eastburn, who is Director of Technical Marketing for Opto 22, a manufacturing company specializing in hardware and software products for industrial automation, remote monitoring, and data acquisition. They're based in California. After 12 years as an automation engineer working in the semiconductor, petrochemical, food and beverage, and life sciences industries, Josh now works with the engineers at Opto 22 to understand the needs of tomorrow's customers. He is also a contributing writer at blog.opto22.com. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. Help us understand how you chose a career in automation control system integration, or maybe the career chose you.
A little bit of both, I guess. My dad was a controls engineer for many years, a system integrator for a variety of semiconductor companies up in the Bay Area here in California. It was always around. PLC parts, chassis, I/O modules in the back of his car. He taught me how to solder, did some early jobs as electromechanical assembly. But when I was in college, I hadn't really picked a direction yet, but I was studying computer science. I don't know how many people come into the industry from computer science or software engineering. I think it tends to be a lot more mechanical, electrical, chemical. I had a friend of a friend who had just lost their only controls engineer, and they were pretty happy to pick up part-time college student who'd done some PLC work. And they were an OEM. They were sending product all around the world. And in order to make any software changes, they had to take their PLC code, send it to a guy they were working with in Canada, and he would send it back. And you can imagine what that does to debugging your software, right? It's just a nightmare. So they were super happy to have me there. And it ended up being a great opportunity because it was kind of a boom time for them. The semiconductor industry was really just taking off when it came to LED, and they served that industry. In a year or two out of school, I became the senior, technically the senior controls engineer over this small group of other controls engineers. And it taught me about budgeting and scheduling and, the personnel issues, that the human factors in engineering, right? That you don't necessarily get that deep into in a college technical program. And I actually really liked it. And that kind of led to an interest in project management, which took me to work with companies like Genentech, and kind of an interest in the business side of automation, which is what ultimately brought me to Opto 22.
So you were like the Doogie Howard. Was it Dewey Howie? What was that?
Doogie Howser? Yeah.
Dewey, yeah.
Yes, I felt like that because all of my colleagues, were 20 or 30 years older than me. Yeah.
What about when you're at like a cocktail party or something like that, and you have to describe to the everyday person what it is that you do? How do you do that?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. I don't know if other engineers experience that, but I definitely have just about every time, particularly when I was coding full time. People would say, what do you do? And I would just say, I'm a software engineer, but I work with manufacturers and factories. I help them work on their equipment. And I think it just doesn't click how all those parts need to come together in somebody's head, right? They don't, if somebody has a technical background, they'd say like, oh, like PLCs? And I go, yeah, like PLCs. Like, okay, then we can talk. Everybody else would have to explain like, yeah, well, pumps and motors and heaters and valves and that move stuff around, right? All of that has software too. Like, oh, okay. And now it's a little different because I get to explain that I'm in marketing, which people kind of think that they know what that means, right? And I'll explain that I write, educational content for engineers. Sometimes they go, oh, sure, that makes sense. And sometimes they're like, well, I thought they were already educated. Like, what could you possibly be teaching them? And, it's a diverse industry. So that's what I say now.
What about Opto 22? What can you tell me about the history of that organization and how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, this is actually a good story. I'm going to tell the version of this story that I like because I think it says a lot about the company to understand where it came from. So back in 1974, the co-founder, engineer, entrepreneur, Bob Ingman, behind Opto 22, had already started a business. And he wasn't super happy with the experience that he had of having this business, seeing it kind of take off, get bought, become publicly traded, and feel like he was having to make compromises for the business side, right? So when he started Opto 22, he did it with the intent of always being a privately held company, not taking any money from anybody, so he didn't have to be beholden to other groups, right? He could focus on the engineering innovation. So this is a company of engineers. People don't always expect sales staff to have technical backgrounds, but all our sales staff do, and they're very involved in the process. And that's because we have approached the way that the company was built. We've kept a very flat management structure so that we're not getting caught up in office politics, that sort of stuff. And as our CEO now says, we can focus on making cool stuff that works. So at the time, back in 1974, Bob Ingman had a portfolio of 22 solid-state relays that he had helped to design a manufacturing process for. And that led to other designs for other kinds of I/O modules, component I/O, eventually distributed I/O systems, and then we introduced Ethernet I/O. That was an innovation of ours, and that we're pretty proud of still. You can see it all over the place. That also led to other innovations like early process automation controller designs, software for control, for mobile visualization. And then in the last couple of years, we've been focusing on our line of edge appliances, particularly the Groove Epic Edge Controller and Groove Rio more recently, which is Edge I/O.
So put this in context for me. If it started out as one guy, Bob Ingman, in 1974, where are we today in terms of number of employees, or are you guys global? Give me that context.
Yeah, so over 45 years, we've moved a lot of product around the world. We've sold over 100 million I/O units to 10,000 different customers around the world. As a company, we remain pretty lean and we remain privately held. So in terms of numbers, we're probably about, I think, 200 people. Hopefully someone doesn't have to correct me on that. But yeah, we're here in Temecula, California, in the southern area, if anybody's familiar with that. And that's our headquarters and our manufacturing, although we have a network of distributors and partners around the world as well.
Yeah, so true confession, I actually had that town in the bio, and I was afraid to say it, so I'm glad you did.
Yes. Yeah.
So does Opto specialize in any industry, product, or discipline?
There are kind of two answers to that. And I would say the first answer is that you'd have a hard time sort of pigeonholing Opto 22. Like I said, when you've sold that much product around the world, you've cut across every different application that you could be a part of, right? So yes, we do discrete control applications. We're involved in process industries. We work heavily with OEMs as well as manufacturing sites, facilities, plants of different kinds. That's really, I would say, our bread and butter is in our I/O product line, which, our catalog is now something like 700 different products. What we really enjoy, that keeps the lights on and lets us play in the space of, engineering innovation, looking around for, what are the unmet needs and what we're trying to solve today in the industry, and then how can we do that? So that's what's, gotten us involved in this sort of convergence between IT technologies and OT technologies, trying to help people move towards all of these different goals that kind of fall under the Industry 4.0 umbrella, if we can say it that way. Yeah.
What suppliers do you partner with?
That's a good question because we are, I'll say, picky. Again, we have this, we're founded on this particular set of principles about how we wanted to approach business. And we understand what that means for our customers in terms of the kind of buying experience that they have, the long-term support for their products, having options, not being locked into a particular ecosystem. So we partner with people that can, I'd say, one, bring something really good to the table. So, for example, we have partnered with Inductive Automation for a number of years now. We saw what they were doing with their Ignition Edge platform, being able to put components of their Ignition Gateway into an edge device, having OPC UA out there in the field, being able to add in other components flexibly. And we thought, yeah, that's something that would be a big benefit to our customers. So we were the first ones to to get on board with that program. And we continue to work with them. Cirrus Link Solutions is a good example, also related to inductive automation because the MQTT communications protocol. Cirrus Link Solutions helped to co-invent that back in the day under the name of a different company, but still Arlen Nipper, who's behind that. Our Benson Hoagland, VP of Marketing, done so many things together with Arlen because he's got a great technology. They understand it. They're helping people to apply it in a way that helps to solve problems without backing them into a corner in terms of cost or support. And more recently, we've started collaborating with Canary Labs. Again, they have a great solution that fits so well into this kind of open ecosystem.
I've been working with associations for my whole career, and I can honestly say I have never experienced a group of business professionals so willing to share, collaborate, and support one another as the CSIA community. During these unprecedented times, having a group of peers to turn to is invaluable. Whether the current climate means your phone is ringing off the hook or you're chewing your nails to the quick, now is the time to invest in your company, yourself, and this unique community that has a culture of sharing baked into its DNA. You'll also have access to member benefits such as best practices, insurance and legal programs, marketing tools, professional development opportunities, and so much more. To find out how you can join and contribute to this one-of-a-kind organization, visit www.controlsys.org/member-services. Look, I know these are some crazy times, but the CSIA community is ready to be by your side. All you have to do is join us. So COVID-19 aside, how has Opto 22 grown or changed in the past year? And what do you expect for the company in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, that's a good qualifier because I think a lot of people's plans have been derailed, right? Whatever they thought was going to happen in the next couple of years, maybe they're not foreseeing that. And we're not discouraged in terms of what's happening around the world. If anything, it's showed us that there's a bigger need. I mean, the reason that we can have this call right now, everybody personally is experiencing the benefit of having technologies in place for remotely accessing face-to-face conversation, but also automation. And that is the space that we're playing in. We're trying to overcome some of these long-standing hurdles, right? Security has been a problem in automation for a long time. We have this really deep technology stack of middleware that's required to move data from the field to the cloud or to data consumers out in the organization. If we can solve those problems for people, then we know that we're going to be in demand. And that's the trajectory that we set for ourselves in the last decade. We've been steadily moving along that trajectory, more so with Groove Epic and Groove Rio. So yeah, we plan to continue solving that problem for people as much as we can.
So help me understand why your customers return to you project after project.
The reason I think that people come to us project after project, usually where we start is there's a problem that I need to solve and it's costing me too much money. It's too complex if I approach it with the traditional solutions. Help me do this in a different way. And then when people start working with us, they work with our applications engineers, typically from before a sale is even on the table through the lifetime of the system, get exposed to our free product support, free training materials, and then they get stuff installed and it just works for decades. Well, that's pretty compelling. It keeps you coming back because you know that it's going to work. You know that you're going to have a good buying experience and that you're going to be able to solve problems in ways that other people haven't discovered yet.
So if a prospective customer is researching you versus one of your competitors, what advice would you give him or her?
Sure. So right in line with that, I'd say, are you trying to do the regular thing, just cheaper and faster? If so, there are a lot of places you can go for that. And we can do cheap and fast as well. We try to be affordable. We make stuff that is fast. We can compare specs. But really, if you want to work with us, it's because you have an unmet need and you're looking for something that you haven't been able to find yet. If that's you, come check us out. We should talk.
Without naming names, unless you want to, tell me about a project that was super challenging and what you did to solve that customer's problem.
So we take a lot of customer requests, particularly because we have something like Groove Epic that has some flexibility built into it. So if somebody wants to do something we can usually tweak the platform and make that an option for them. One of our customers approached us, a chemical processor that has equipment distributed around many different customer sites. And this is characteristic of a process that happens here a lot. They approached us and they said, well, we'd like to take some of this information that we have in the field and we want to bring it into a database, right? Can you help us do that? That was the initial request. So we said, sure. So we can deploy Groove Epic. It has Ignition Edge on board. We can pull in legacy signals from PLCs, from existing SCADA systems that you have. We can process that with Node-RED, also running on board, and then send that up to a database. Great. And then they said, oh, actually, that did work. In the first week or so, we were able to identify bottlenecks in our process and start talking about how we could improve this. We want to do that everywhere. Okay, so that's a different solution. We didn't know that's what you had in mind, but let's talk about that. So now, we can upgrade from running Ignition on one Epic. Let's put Ignition up in the cloud. So they put an Ignition SCADA system up in the cloud, and now they're using Groove Epic as kind of a data collector in the field, right? Bringing data from these heterogeneous sources and then sending it up to the cloud via MQTT. So that means you can do that securely, which made their IT department really happy. Another conversation we often get involved in, right, is just helping users talk to the stakeholders involved and understand what it is that they're trying to do for the organization. You get a lot of skepticism there. But yeah, once they had that architecture built out, now it was easy for them to scale up to bring in other solutions. They have a common MQTT broker up in the cloud, so we can connect other sites and have this sort of shared data infrastructure in place. Not MQTT, but Ignition has great functions already built in for doing SQL transactions. So they could now push data from their MQTT broker to a database for analysis. But then once they did that, they're like, well, if we have a system in the cloud, we want to do some visualization. Ignition also has a mobile visualization package. So now we're helping them, working together with them and inductive automation to get them set up on Ignition Perspective so that they can see all of this data, not just in their database, but on their cell phones, on their tablets. So super fun and something that, is pretty characteristic of the kind of problems that we help people with these days.
What kinds of trends and challenges are you seeing in industrial automation right now?
Mm-hmm. So that's actually, like I said, that's a good example of something that we hear a lot of. You could say generally these kind of data integration challenges, right? It's a different kind of integration challenge than what we were dealing with back in the 80s and 90s. We can do integration at the field level, and yeah, we've been able to do integration between the plant floor and the business side. But we're trying to do it in a way that's more secure, that's more scalable, that is repeatable without having to do a small project every time we want to bring in a new data source into the network. That's the trend that we're seeing, is people asking for more data, but more efficiently, right? Being able to share that across the network with fewer hurdles to jump through. And then the challenge to that, I think, is that we haven't yet as an industry settled on a set of standards or technologies that are going to get us there, right? We're pushing a lot of different things forward, and there's a lot of debate still going on about, what we want to establish as the approach.
What makes Opto 22 optimistic about the future of automation?
I think the thing that we're excited about is that we can see the parts of the solution coming together. Like I mentioned, we're choosy about the people that we partner with. And the people that we have partnered with are those that we feel like have a unique contribution to make to what will become the long-term IIoT or Industry 4.0 architecture. The challenge there is that these are still early days. People are still getting educated about what is out there. They've maybe heard of MQTT, but they don't know what it can do for their organization. They haven't yet seen how it can solve their problems. So that's on us and other vendors like us in the industry to make the case for things that people need to give their attention to that could make a big difference for what they're trying to solve.
Do you think that could be a silver lining to this pandemic, and that it's accelerating kind of this digital transformation?
That's certainly what we're hearing, not just from our own customers, but people have some time to sit and contemplate a little bit because the brakes are on some of their projects. And yeah, definitely people are seeing online participation in conferences it's all ticking up while we're stuck at home doing some of the reading, going through white papers that we meant to go through months ago and just haven't. Yeah, definitely.
With so many people working from home, canceling in-person meetings and events, and spending more and more time online, it's more important than ever that your digital presence is top-notch and that you find creative ways to maximize your marketing resources and get in front of your customers. The Industrial Automation Exchange and the Talking Industrial Automation podcast are the perfect places to start. The Exchange offers upgrades, packages, and display opportunities to ensure your brand is top of mind during your customers' complicated, research-based buying journey. The Talking Industrial Automation podcast can also help because now you can place your 60-second spot into the podcast. It's super easy and a unique way to reach new audiences. To learn more about the packages and advertising opportunities or how to become a podcast sponsor, contact me, Lisa Richter, at industrydir@controlsys.org. Let's face it, it's a digital world out there, and you need to make sure your company doesn't get left behind. Let the Exchange and podcast go to work for you. So switching gears a little bit, help me understand why Opto 22 decided to join CSIA.
Yeah, CSIA, when we joined, it was because we could see that CSIA members had an influence in the marketplace, not just because we wanted to have an influence, but because we wanted to participate in an industry community that was voicing the concerns that we needed to know about. We wanted to be able to participate in that conversation and hear from other people, what are the challenges that you're dealing with, right? What are the solutions that you're considering? And then, of course, be able to advocate for the technologies that we thought would make the biggest difference for the industry.
Does Opto 22, forgive me, I should know this, but does Opto 22 have an SI partner program? And if you do, tell us about it.
Yeah, definitely we do. So we have the Opto partner program. Don't know how this compares to other SI partner programs that other vendors might have, but in our case, I can say at least that it's not a revenue stream for us. The intent of our Opto partner program is to vet the system integrators who have worked with our technologies to understand that they have a track record of delivering automation successfully, consistently, so that we can connect them when somebody comes to us, a customer comes to us and says, hey, can you give us a recommendation? We can say, yes, we have a whole list, and we can tell you what their specialties are, what industries they focus on, what part of the world they're in. That's a service that we can offer to both sides, right? And it's great to facilitate that interaction. And then in addition to the Opto Partner Program, we also have our Opto Certified Trainer Program for those distributors and system integrators who are interested in offering training services. We, again, take the step of testing their knowledge, making sure that they are thoroughly familiar with our product portfolio, and also just have that, coaching, education, it's a different skill. Tangential to whether you're good at as an engineer, right, or designing automation. We want to make sure that the people who are Opto certified trainers are good at creating a training experience. So we do that, and we separately highlight those through opto22.com. And then more recently, we've added an IoT certification. Again, this isn't something that you pay to have. It's for those SI partners who are working in that particular space, where they're kind of crossing over between IT and OT, these applications that are bringing those different technologies together. We've recognized that it requires a different skill set, right? You might be good at designing PLCs, PACs, but if you're not familiar with IT systems and how to integrate with databases and that kind of stuff, we recognize that if you have those skills, we want to be able to highlight those for the customers that are looking to solve those particular kinds of problems. Yeah.
So switching gears again,
okay.
Tell us about your OPC Foundation or OMAC Foundation involvement.
Again, I feel like this is kind of a feather in our cap, something that we can be proud of. The first version of the OPC specification was signed right upstairs in our conference room with Microsoft and other industry partners there, because there was this problem at the time that needed this interoperability solution. And we continue to be proud of our support, at that moment. Obviously, technology has continued to evolve since then, but OPC is still part of our recommended architecture, as well as other open solutions. That's, I think, open protocols, open standards is it's a value for us, right? We understand what it does for customers to be able to have not only the option to get started, to experiment with technology without having to fork out a lot of money for licensing fees, but the kind of flexibility that it gives them long-term to decide how their system is going to evolve and not being stuck in a particular architecture.
I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I mean, when we talked earlier about what happened in the past year and what's happening coming up, we sort of put COVID-19 aside. But if we bring that back into the conversation, because it's really hard to have any conversation without at least acknowledging the fact that we're all going through something completely crazy. Has that changed the way you're doing business, how you're talking with your customers, your strategy? I mean, I know for a lot of salespeople, they're trying to figure out how to substitute all those trade shows they used to go to. You know, what about you guys?
Yeah, so we've certainly done a little bit of the sort of virtual conference thing, but I'm going to give like a virtual high five to our sales guys who went from making lots of face-to-face calls to doing everything online. So I'll just show you what we're doing. Here's our PoE cam that I have running that shows off my current office setup here is sort of sequestered from the rest of the company. That's what all of our sales guys are doing right now. We put a bunch of our equipment on the company network so that they could VPN into it from wherever they were in the country. And then we set up a bunch of cameras like this so that we could, as best we could, share what we have, what we're trying to explain and teach to customers with them. As it's not a high touch experience, but we've found that people actually really like that experience. We put together a few webinars, same idea, trying to give that live demo experience as much as we could in a virtual environment. Yeah.
Okay, so one final question, and it may be the hardest one yet. If you could go into a time machine and go back and talk to younger Josh, what advice would you give him?
Younger Josh, he needed a lot of advice. So I think, so it's such a multidisciplinary kind of industry, right? You have people who are coming from a mechanical engineering background or an electrical background, who are coming from metrology or from like a software engineering background. And you really need all of those skills, right, to get involved. So I think it's important to understand that you can't just approach it from whatever your particular background is. I know there are some folks who were educated in industrial control, but there aren't that many schools that actually have programs focused on that, right? So the majority of us have to learn to be cross-disciplinary. At the same time, you want to have a skill set that is unique to you. So in my case, I was coming from a software engineering background, and I thought object-oriented programming had a lot to offer to the industrial applications that I was working with. Not easy to do with some PLCs, not easy to do with some HMI design programs. I tried to bring that so that we could have, particularly for an OEM, software that was reusable, that we could get a lot of long-term value out of, that was intuitive. And the engineers that I worked with, I've tried to share that with them. And I think that's kind of the second point that comes to mind is you want to make connections with other people who are interested in that, in whatever your core skill set is, because there's an opportunity to build a community around an idea. And when you can do that, when you can share something with people, when you are willing to learn from them, you get better, but the industry also gets better. And if I can make a third point, I guess it would be that as you start getting involved in the community and making those connections, it helps if you have an idea of where you want to go long term. Personally, for your career, yes, that's a must. But also, where would you like to see the industry go in terms of technologies that you want to see come to the fore, or ideas or approaches? Maybe particularly as a system integrator, there's so much to be said about the way that we finance projects, the way that we, that whole system, the business of automation, right? If you have a perspective on that, please come forward and share that so that the industry can get better.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Talking Industrial Automation. If you are interested in learning more about Josh Eastburn or Opto 22, you can find them on the Industrial Automation Exchange at www.csiexchange.com. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Josh, for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help others find us by leaving a 5-star review and sharing your favorite episodes with colleagues. Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Thanks also to bensound.com and Wistia for the music bumpers. Until next time.